right, welcome to Your Time, Your Money, the show where your time is just as valuable as your money. Welcome back, Adam. How are you?
Oh, good. Yeah, summer's going fantastic. I've got quite a sunburn going, so yeah, it's good.
Oh, great. I don't burn.
Yeah, it's I tan and then I burn and then I tan and then I burn. It's a vicious cycle.
Oh, well, welcome back. Excited about today. Today's topic is going to be actually titled something that's probably the most common question that we get, and that's just, can I retire?
Yep.
And it's just a loaded question, right? It's not one that you can answer off your cuff, and there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah, when I sit with a client, and the very first thing that they'll ask me is typically, who does your hair? The second question, by the way, obviously the big question is can I retire consistently above and beyond any other question?
Yeah, well, let's jump into it. I'll have you do the honors,
Sure.
and it's your time.
Your money.
So, that common question that everybody asks being, can I retire? I think there's two ways to look at it. One is the math, right? One is financially, can I retire? And then the other is the emotional or psychological side.
Right.
Right? Because a lot of people have tied to this concept of retirement perhaps an age. And what I find is usually the ages that people throw out there of when they want to retire are all centered around key factors, right? Like at 62.
Right. Social
Right.
Security. Oh, now I'm eligible.
Yeah,
Yep.
I can claim, right?
Right.
Or 65 because of Medicare, right? Or even some people 70 because, hey, that was tied around my old RMD numbers. Now it's 72,
Right.
right? So, first is identifying, like, why do you want to retire? Like, what's that purpose of that age that you're telling me you want to retire at, right? If it's 65, and most of the time I can kind of guess that the client has a mindset saying, I just want to get to when Medicare is available to handle my health care.
Right.
Right. And the point we always make is, well, retiring at 64 doesn't mean you don't have health care. It just means we have to allot your money to pay for health care for maybe 1 year until Medicare kicks in with your supplemental plans or whatever that might be.
Yeah. And, a lot of people, too, when they have it in their mind, well, I'll retire once I get the house paid off. Or I get X expense, whatever that expense is, paid off. Whether it's student loans that you covered for your child, or whatever it is. But there's that sometimes that mental block where they would say, "Gee, I would retire if I could," And I'll say, well, one of the questions, well, when do you want to retire? And everybody, a lot of us, oh, today if I could.
Yeah.
It's that, well, but I don't know, can I retire? So.
Yeah, and on the tail end, what we see thousands of times as we work with our clients is that people who delay retirement usually end up having significant resources later in life in their 80s and come back to us and say, wow, I wish I had retired earlier.
Right.
Right. So that statement, can I retire, a lot of the I guess you would say drawback to waiting on the can I retire type statement is the fact that people have a fear of the unknown. Right? Because they're changing a lifetime habit. And that's one thing I want listeners to understand is you're going from a habit that you've trained your body and your brain and your mind, to do for 30 years. And that's to get up in the morning, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, leave the house, drive to work. You develop relationships, right, with your coworkers. Right. So emotionally, you're leaving maybe some people you like, maybe some people you don't like, depending on how many years you've been working with them. But that's the hardest thing to overcome is just the habitual habit of going somewhere and doing something. Because you feel value, you feel like I have meaning at work a lot of times, and that break of that habit is very hard to do.
Yeah, and there's that push pull that happens, right? The meaning. I would retire if I'd like to, if I can, but like you said, I kind of still like working. Some people don't like working anymore, but there's some people that still enjoy their jobs. But it all becomes a matter just of timing.
Yeah. So, let's look at it in kind of, I guess, pre-stages, right? Let's look at it as just before retirement, maybe some of the things that you want to have situated in your life to make the retirement decision a little bit easier, right? And we run into all different scenarios where people are getting ready to retire, but they have those stipulations. I want to make sure the house is paid off. I want to make sure the car is paid off. I want to make sure this debt's under control or what have you. And those are things that we encourage clients to do before they retire. Right? If they want to have a new roof put on their home, right? A good time to do that is when you have working income, not after you retire. Right?
Yeah, you don't want to draw, you don't want to, if you don't have to in those situations, you don't want to have to draw away from your retirement assets for something that you could have taken care of while you have earned income. Absolutely.
Yeah, so for those listeners that are in that stage where they're questioning, can I retire now? And if I can, I would like to. Some of the things that I say is, try to get those large expenses and those things done associated with your residence, your primary residence, done while you have working income. You know what I mean? And get through that because, right, a roof is nowadays 30, 50-year warranty or on some of them or whatever. That's probably the last time you're going to do your roof, right? The big expenses. Maybe it's the furnace in the home, right? Maybe it's you need a new vehicle.
The water tank, vehicle,
A water heater, water tank. And a lot of people are going tankless now. Those are great, by the way, which are good.
I got to get one of those.
Yeah, unlimited water. Unlimited.
Yeah. With 3 teenagers in the house, I need to get one of those. So, definitely.
The old 20 gallons not making it.
Not at all. No.
So you want to pre-plan retirement in the sense of getting the bills under control, getting the expenses, the things that may arrive shortly in retirement that are going to cost a lot of money, getting them out of the way, right? Other things that you want to look at is say, okay, well, how long would I need to provide health care for before Medicare kicks into place, right? And if so, what's that going to do to my portfolio?
Right. And also taking into account most spouses aren't the same age, right? They're occasionally they are, but usually there's one older or one younger. And we have to take into account planning, if you're planning with a spouse, when is retirement best for both of you or for one of you based on the situation.
Yeah, because you may be covered under your spouse's medical insurance until Medicare.
Yeah.
Right? So perhaps maybe one spouse can retire, go on to the health care benefits of the other, and then transition to Medicare.
Yep.
Which may be about the same time that spouse is then able to retire.
Yep.
Depending on, obviously, age.
Yep.
Right? If you're the cougar,
right,
you may reach Medicare first,
right,
and be able to retire based off of that.
Yeah.
But you also, in that context of health insurance, need to view your health. Your prescriptions, what are you on? A lot of people, they have health insurance, but they practically never use it.
Yeah.
They're in great shape. They're in good health. They're, in their early, mid-60s, but they just, besides the annual physical, there's nothing wrong with them. Yeah. So besides that, it might just be the premium that they're worried about. Well, if you've got 12 months of premium before Medicare kicks in, a lot of times your portfolio can handle that.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and when it comes to sort of coinciding with all of this, right? There's the 2 stages that we've talked about before. There's the saving stage, and then the retirement and income distribution stage. And if the question comes up in your mind, can I retire? That typically means that you're still working, right? Usually. And what's that timeline? Is it, if I could, I'd retire in a year, or if I could, I'm planning on retiring in 5 years. Either way, it's getting all of these steps that we're talking about taken care of, knowing the plan, right? We've talked about this. Yeah. You have to have a plan in order to make these right steps and feel good about it, feel comfortable about it.
Yeah, and in that decision-making process, we live in a world where people think it's this fairy tale where you can just always live off of just the interest or income you get off of your assets.
And that's been a mindset that's been around for years. We come across that all the time where they, people, if as long as I make 4%, I can, live off of this. And there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, well, because people, they don't like seeing their balance going down. But if it's a gradual descent, right? Like you don't like jumping out of a plane without a parachute, right?
Last I checked,
right? Because it's not usually gradual, and the stop at the end is really the problem.
Yeah,
right? But there's nothing wrong with taking that approach to retirement and jumping out with a parachute that slowly declines your assets in a manageable way that you can land in and not get hurt.
Right.
Right. So this idea of I need $3 or $4 million to retire. It's discouraging to people that don't have that saved up.
Right.
That might be in the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 range, right? But we also have to understand that behind that is what? A nice layer of Social Security.
Right.
Or for some people, a pension and Social Security, right? And that makes the decision a lot easier.
The timeline of once someone is retired, right? They tend to, in the early stages of retirement, they're traveling a lot, they're doing the things that they've wanted to do. Maybe they've got little pet projects going on, little construction projects around the house, taking care of those things. But those are extra, not extra expenses, but those are expenses, right? And that's what we would call the immediate time frame. When you've got the near future time frame, you start to slow down on the traveling. You start slowing down on the projects. And then it goes into potentially the long-term care component of the later or latter part of your retirement. And taking into account those other elements, again, is part of that, can I retire? Are your assets in a place where we've got those dollars?
Yeah, we talked about it just before coming on the show. It's
right.
The bucket strategy.
Right. Yep.
Right. It's having your money partitioned out for different time frames in retirement.
Yep. Hedge for expenses, hedge for Medicare costs, medical costs, but inflation as well. All of those components that can, if not properly planned for, can blow up your retirement.
Yeah, and another thing that discourages a lot of people is they think they need a level of income forever.
Right.
And one thing that we try to instill in clients is, in most cases, reality dictates we front load retirement. Mm-hmm. We try to have more money coming in early on while your health enables you to do the things you want to do.
Right.
So that later on, when you can't travel, when you're not necessarily out and about, mm-hmm. right, at 89 as you are at 62,
right,
that you can get those things done early on in retirement. Yeah. And then usually people settle into a habitual spending pattern that's pretty stable.
Sure.
And it ends up dropping after certain periods of time.
Right.
And the other thing to look at in the can I retire is you may be looking at your current bills right now. But how are those bills going to change the minute you say I'm retired? Right? Perhaps you're driving from, I'll just use a local example. Forgive me for our listeners in other states, but in a local example, maybe you're driving from Windham Mountain up to Albany every day for work. Mm-hmm. Right? And you're blowing through gas like crazy, right?
Right.
Well, if you're not driving there every day, that's a big bill that's going to be reduced or go away.
I was going to say at $4 to $5 a gallon, sure.
And maybe you're eating out lunch every day while you're at work. And, so yep. If you actually do the math on what you're living off of, you'd be surprised that you probably could retire earlier than not, right? Because sure. You get $100 in, say, but are you spending the $100? Maybe $20 of that's going to your 401k. Which is no longer going to be there as far as a contribution goes when you retire.
Right.
Right? Maybe part of that's going to your fuel and food and stuff like that just associated with your work. Mm-hmm. Right? So maybe out of that $100, you're only living off of 60 or 70. And that other part goes away.
Right.
Right? And the other thing people don't view as an increase in retirement is when their mortgage drops off. Right? They've been paying on it for 30 years, right. 15 years, 20 years. Yep. But we view that as a raise, as an increase in
sure.
retirement.
Sure. I was just talking about this recently with a client, and we were talking about how they're about a year away from finishing their mortgage up. Like, yeah, and then we're all done. Then we have $3,000 a month. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, is your escrow in there for taxes and insurance? Like, yeah. Like, okay, well. So you're still going to have to partition, and we have to count for that $1,000 of still expense that's going to be there. So yes, $2,000 you get to keep, right?
It's not like your property taxes.
Right, they go away.
Or school taxes.
But it was the type of thing where they were like, oh, that makes sense. It just, people don't think about it that way. They think about, oh, well, my mortgage payment's this. Well, what does it include? Just a little quick side story.
Yeah, so back to my point, it's important that you understand whether or not, as a listener, you want a front load retirement, which is more of the reality that happens.
Right.
Or you want level, or what most advisors plan for is increasing to keep up with inflation.
Right.
Right. So they're increasing it to keep up with inflation. They're giving you, just enough to live off of now. And then all of a sudden you have all this excess at 85, 90 years old,
right,
when you don't need it. Right. And there was so much more stuff that you could have done early on.
Right. And as we were talking about with inflation, making sure that we are prepared for it in that near future bucket. Now, again, as the fluctuations of your habits, your life habits change, and your spending habits change along with it, but that doesn't mean, like in a period right now where inflation seems to be coming into play, that we can account for that and have those extra dollars. So if we're living on that, we're living comfortably and paying our bills and enjoying retirement, but then the cost of living goes up, we're able to account for that.
Yeah, let's get a little bit more into the logistics. We'll take a break for a second. It's our community spotlight time, which we always enjoy as part of our segments. Today we have a great community spotlight. We're going to be highlighting the Northeast Kidney Foundation. For those listeners that have been religiously with us, they understand that we work with them pretty heavily and help raise funds for them, as well as promote their activities in the Capital District and surrounding states. They're in 8 different states. But Northeast Kidney Foundation is at 22 Colvin Ave in Albany, New York. You can reach them at 800-999-9697 or at healthykidneys.org. Go on there, check them out. There's places where you can donate to them to help their cause out, as well as other fundraising events coming up. We have a couple of fundraising events coming up that are going to be phenomenal for them this year. We have a golf outing later in September for the year that if you'd like to be involved in, reach out to them. They'll get you some information on it as well. We also have another fundraising event coming up shortly here. What's the date on that, Matt?
November 5th.
November 5th. That's the voice behind the camera talking about the November 5th activity out there. So check them out, healthykidneys.org. Great organization to be part of as well. So
They do a lot of good things.
yeah, a lot of good things.
Yep.
It's a good thing we have 2 kidneys.
Right.
Because with only one, they may not be in business.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, getting back into our conversation about can I retire, right? We've touched on kind of some of the questions that people ask centered around can I retiring. Let's just talk about the planning part of it.
Sure.
Right. And I think we'd be remiss without saying that the first thing we need to plan on is our Social Security strategy.
Yep.
Right. When do we intend to file?
You have, I feel like there's 2 sides to it, right? You have the client that says, well, I don't have longevity in my family, so I'm going to make sure I claim right at 62 because I don't want to lose a dime, going forward. And then you've got people that understand that for every year you wait, there's a guaranteed 8% increase of what you're going to be making through Social Security. So the balance between that, of course, is when is your timing on retirement, and what does that claim do for you at that time, both now and in the future?
Yeah, and to the claiming early strategy, sometimes it's just an emotional reaction to the fact that it's the government finally giving them back money,
right,
versus money they've been taking your whole life, and it's this. I relate it to like going on a cruise ship, right? And you've already paid $3,000 for the cruise or whatever it is, and then you go and load up your buffet plate. And you're like, they're not going to make money off of me.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry. How much food are you going to have to eat
right.
to justify, what I mean,
yep.
that cost? Same thing with Social Security. If you do the math on what you've paid into Social Security versus what they're going to pay out in your own private account, you could have a ton more money.
Right.
Right. But that knee-jerk reaction of claiming at 62 doesn't necessarily mean you put a lot of thought into how does this play into your retirement picture.
Right.
Right. Because that question centering around can I retire also has to be centered around am I going to get adverse tax situations? Am I going to be in a different bracket? Is it going to affect my Medicare premiums based on my income coming in? Is it going to maybe upset the apple cart when it comes to conversion strategy to a Roth IRA, moving money from a pre-tax to an after-tax source? Yep. So it's not
affects the spouse.
Do it.
Can affect the spouse as well, and when they claim and how much they get in claiming based on who's the higher earner, and whether or not full retirement age has been reached, whether that's 66 and 8 months or 67 years old, whatever that full retirement age that, based on your date of birth, is, that can affect how much money your spouse gets.
Yeah, and you really want to sit down with an advisor. If you haven't, call our group. We'll sit down with you. We'll walk you through Social Security planning options and strategies that could benefit you. Right. But we put that in the context of all your other assets, and it needs to be put in that context because think of your retirement income from different sources coming in as dominoes, right? And if you push over the 5th domino, that not all of them are going to go down. The first 4 are not going to go down, right? So you may not want to push that button for Social Security right away because it could affect your entire retirement on other strategies and planning that you might want to do. Right. So that decision of can I retire should be centered around should I take Social Security now or later? And it's a pretty simple question to ask, but not so much once you start putting the math behind it and understanding, what it means to you down the road.
Yeah, and again, being in the capital region here of New York, we have a lot of state workers. State workers have pensions, but then we come across the client that says, "What? Oh, I wish I had a pension," And then we talk about how we can do that and what does that do for, building that fixed income for your life, your spouse's life, et cetera, and how that plays in with Social Security and your standard of living.
Yeah, and there's products out there where we can create a pension-like income
Right.
that can bring that stability in behind somebody that doesn't have a state pension.
Yep.
Right? And why would you want to do that, right? Because your needs are only going to be so much. Your wants are what costs a lot in retirement, right? But if we can meet your needs by using Social Security and maybe a small fixed source that provides a pension type income, then we know that you're comfortable forever.
Right.
And then all the ancillary wants and desires that you have in retirement are met by investments, investment return, stock market return, whatever that might be.
Right, and that falls into those dollars end up falling into those buckets we were talking about, the near future and future dollars.
Yeah, and one of the things I like to do to a client so they can understand whether they can retire, and it's a pretty simple strategy that and I know you do it too, that we do, and that's just taking their entire dollar balance of all the cash accounts they have, 401k, IRA, 403b, savings, CDs, whatever, taking that as a one lump sum, and then going out on the market and finding a product, it doesn't matter which one, that provides a guaranteed lifetime income. Yep. And it usually gives you a percentage. So for instance, maybe it gives you 5.85%. You take their entire number times it by 5.85%, and it shows you in the market today with products that are out there what you could generate in a guaranteed pension. Right. And a lot of times that number is $60,000, $70,000, $80,000.
Right.
Not that we're making the recommendation for them to move all their money into one product, but we illustrate that so a client can understand what their money could do in the market today, in a lot of times a guaranteed space or a space that's super conservative, and it gives them a range and it opens up a lot of eyes.
Sure, and then you combine that with the Social Security timing and income of what, and sometimes you get people that in retirement are 100,000, 120,000, just using it as an example. And it, like you said, it's an eye-opening thing, because then they might say, well, I'm not going to need that much. That's great, because the point is to illustrate that, yeah, you can retire and be okay. Yeah. It's a matter of just how we work your plan.
Well, the common mistake people make when they ask, can I retire, is they look at one source individually at a time. Right. And they say, well, Social Security is not that much, I can't retire off of that. Well, what I get off my investment income is not enough, I can't retire off of that. Or my pension is not quite enough, I can't retire off of that. But they're not mentally putting all those pictures together.
Right.
I sat with a client a couple weeks ago, and we walked through this strategy and just illustrating where that money's coming from. Mm-hmm. Because what they're looking at is they're looking at the monthly payment. And they're saying, well, this is only going to pay $1,500 a month. My bond account over here is only paying $600 a month. This account over here is only paying $400 a month. I got an old pension at Lockheed or wherever paying $300 a month. And all those numbers don't add up to anything individually to where they can retire. So we just went through and itemized, and we said, hey, this is what you have coming in here, here, here. In this case, they had a rental income coming in. Okay. They had Social Securities that they could claim, but they weren't claiming at the point. No pension in the household, but some other pension-type vehicles we have done in the past. Okay. And when the long story short, when we got done with adding up all these little tiny streams of income that were, in most cases, fixed coming in for retirement, it was almost $7,200 a month. And when I illustrated that, and I said, hey, you're talking almost $90,000 a year. Yeah. As far as that, they were like, oh wow, what are we waiting for? We can retire.
Yeah. Yep.
So sometimes it's just not piecing the puzzle together. And that's where we come in, is to show you ways to maximize all those little streams of income to where it gets to that point.
And you kind of just shine light on a moment that I really appreciate when we're working with a client and they go, oh my gosh, I can retire. And you talk about, the bag of bricks that just gets let go because now they know. And they may not be ready at that moment to retire, but I know they know that they can. And then it's more on, okay, when do I feel like, closing the doors on working?
When's my employer tick me off?
Right.
Next time, now that I know, I'm going to say, I'm out of here.
And I think that's a huge burden that falls off of people's shoulders once they know.
Yeah. And in that context, we have to understand too, in an inflationary period like we are today, the Fed's coming in and they're raising rates, right? Just recently 0.75%. Yeah. And that helps produce more income in a lot of the fixed vehicles down the road. Right? Yields go up astronomically in certain vehicles. And that's the time when you want to start planning out, like, hey, 5 years from now, maybe I want to look at a fixed product because rates are so much more attractive now and lock into that for a long period of time for income planning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And along with that, along with these different vehicles, when we're in a savings strategy, when we're not yet retired, we're getting there. As you were saying, that people sometimes look at sources of income as individuals, but if you think about like a retirement, like a 401k, a 403b, a deferred comp, any of those types of savings work, related vehicles, it ends up just being one big pile of dough, right? It's whatever it is, it's a big pile of money. And the thing of it is that people think of it that way, when really every single dollar that's in that pot or that bag of cash with a dollar sign on it, right, should have a job to do. And some of that job is on the immediate time frame where we're setting up income, or it's that near future or future time frame. But every dollar that's saved needs to have a plan.
Yeah, and some of the things that throw a wrench into retirement planning, or one of the most common thing, is taxes.
Yep.
And the taxes may not be the day you retire that you really feel them, but they may be when certain key things happen, like required minimum distribution kick in. Yep. That's it's 72 and a half. So the answer to the question of can I retire is usually yes, or soon.
Yeah.
Right. But the question's never centered around what's retirement look like when I'm 80 or 85. Mm-hmm. And maybe for some clients or listeners' case, they might have to take out $300,000, $400,000 of an IRA in a year just because of required minimum distribution.
Yeah, talk about that tax rate.
But those are those future dominoes that I was talking about, where all of a sudden now your Medicare premiums go up, you're paying more for health care. And those are all strategies in retirement that we work on. Right. So just because we say you can retire doesn't necessarily mean that your accounts are positioned properly or that you have a game plan in place to keep you retired or keep the money in your pocket versus Uncle Sam.
Right. And, so if someone retires at age 62, and we know that we can see at age 72 a very large required minimum distribution kicking in, we spend those 10 years working on that tax strategy. And it's done over that 10-year time frame in order to help alleviate that, that tax rate and your expenses go just because of what you're having to take in.
And one of the other things too that we need to take into consideration, and people don't like talking about it because it's deals with mortality, is that a lot of people, there's an age difference that's beneficial to them between them and their parents. And what I mean by that is that their parents are going to pass away sometime during their retirement. Yeah. And you have to look at that as far as, is there going to be an inheritance coming in? Mm-hmm. Maybe there's going to be a lump sum infusion when you're 75 or 80. Right. And that may encourage you to retire early, knowing that you're going to spend down your assets maybe a little bit more, front loading and doing fun things in retirement. Right. But understanding that if with proper planning, right, and I say this because a lot of parents or grandparents don't have an estate plan, mm-hmm. and money will be lost to a nursing home, unfortunately, or whatever that might be. But with that in mind, you can't discount it. You can't say, well, I'm not worried about that, or you know what I mean, because that could be the answer to you retiring early. Yeah, it is the fact that maybe you're a partial beneficiary on an estate that has $800,000, and you're going to walk away with $250,000. Well, that's going to make a big decision. Do I work an extra 5 years, or do I retire now, knowing that may or may not come in?
And then often with those types of scenarios, there's what then becomes an inherited IRA, which brings about its own different types of complications with money that has to be taken within a 10-year time frame, no matter what. And whether it's a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA or other type of qualified dollars, 10 years. And we have to plan for that too, because that could all of a sudden kick the tax rate back up. So there's lots of ways that, lots of things and factors to consider, in particular when it comes to inheritance.
Yeah, so I think motivation-wise, I think it's important for listeners to understand that most people when they retire, they probably could have retired 2, 3, 4 years earlier if they had just sat down and had the plan. If they had just sat down and had the clear comprehension of where their income was going to come from and what their different streams were going to look like, when they were going to come in, what they were going to trigger as far as expenses being paid off, and with a little planning, they could have retired early. Sure. But most people won't know that, right? Because they'll wait, they'll be retired, and they'll be fine. Right. But they missed out on maybe 3 years of being healthy, being able to travel, being able to take grandkids or great-grandkids or whatever on more trips or vacations. And so it is always important that you understand when's the date I can retire. What's the most I can get off of my investments?
Right. If you're sitting with the right person as a right advisor, they're talking to you about that as we discuss a savings strategy. We know there's going to be a retirement income distribution strategy that it will follow that, and that planning and that part of the process really starts before retirement. It doesn't start all of a sudden at retirement. It starts well before. So it could be that whether it's a year or 5 years prior.
Yeah. So I think we've brought up a lot of good issues and points today. But that question of can I retire, like I said at the beginning, it's such a loaded question.
Right.
But it's very easy for us to tell somebody the amount of money they could generate off their assets today.
Right.
With the products that are on the market and stuff. Not that all your money, once again, should go to one individual product, but it's very easy mathematically to prove somebody can retire today.
Right.
And if clients don't know that or listeners don't know that and they want us to run those numbers, it's a very simple calculation for us to do to give them a ballpark gauge of what they've currently acquired and what it can provide for them. Yeah. But in recapping, one, before retirement, focus on the things that you want to get done while you have working income, right? The renovations, the repairs, maybe the purchase of the retirement home, ahead of time, or looking at that transition ahead of time, depending on where it's located, in demographics to where you're living, right? I mean, obviously it's a little harder to do if you're planning on moving to Arizona, but you're still working in New York for 2 years or so.
Yep.
And then analyze your resources and what's available. And part of that is your Social Security. And then also get rid of this conception that just because you're not 65, you're going to have to pay an abundant amount for health care.
Right.
Right? It may be 1 or 2 years that you have to pay it, but you might be able to just restructure some of your assets to pay it for you. Right. Which is the important part. Yep. And I encourage the population to get rid of this 62, 65, 67, 70, mentality, because that's what we're told we have to do. Right. That's not always the case, and most of the time's not reality.
And usually that's more of that water cooler advisor that we've talked about. Your coworker that said, well, I got to wait until I'm 65 because of this, or I got to wait till 62 because of that. So
so analyze that, meet with a financial professional, figure out, hey, where am I going to be in retirement now? Where am I going to be, like you said, in the bucket strategy? Yep. And do I have enough money to fill up those buckets that I need to? Yep. And then ultimately look at the reality of your household and whether a parent or a grandparent's going to pass away during your retirement years. If there's going to be more assets coming in that way, and the asset might be a home, maybe it's a rental property, maybe it's land. It's a little easier decision if you're the sole beneficiary. Yeah. Not necessarily if it's split between 10 kids, right? But in reality, it is assets coming into your household. And then ultimately, in that strategy, the hardest part is just saying I'm retired. Right. It's breaking the habit of going to work.
Right.
Right. And that we can't help you through. That's something that mentally and psychologically a listener and a client has to commit to on their own. And my encouragement to people listening right now is, if you're having trouble saying I'm retiring, it's because of the unknown, which is scary. Yeah. Don't let that affect you financially by waiting. Meaning, you will find new habits, you will find new groups, new relationships on that next stage of life. Right. And usually when that happens, most of the time, and I know you get it all the time like me, you always get that, I wish I had done this earlier. Yeah. Yep. Right? So with words of encouragement from us, look at it now and try to retire earlier if you can, because your golden years are only as long as you're healthy. Right. And that could change overnight.
Literally.
So,
yeah.
Exactly. So I think we covered a lot of topics today. Any other things that you want to chat about today?
It is a topic that's near and dear to me, because honestly, one of the things that I love to do is to help people put those bricks down and not have to worry about it. And like I said, they may not be ready to retire today, but just knowing that they can retire when they want to, and they're going to be okay. Yeah. They're going to be set. That is like I said, for me, that's probably the part of my job that brings me the most joy, is helping people in that capacity.
well, reach out to us. You can find us at the Esley Group at Cetera Investors, and you can reach us at 800-222-3202. We're located at 43 British American Boulevard in Latham, New York. And as always, you can find us on yourtimeyourmoney.net. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, on our platforms. Yep. We're also found on Spotify and Google Play as well. So with that, we'll leave you, and hopefully you will be able to retire soon. So it's your time.
Your money.